little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine till Jesus comes. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Don't let Satan blow it out. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know who Jesus is. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know who Jesus is. He's the lily of the valley. He's the bright and morning star. He's the fairest of 10,000. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know who Jesus is. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know. Everybody ought to know who Jesus is. Well, welcome. Glad to see you folks, except I can't see you, but you can see me, hopefully. Well, I hope it's okay for you. These songs I'm going to do tonight, most of them have to do with suffering a bit. And not a pleasant subject to start with. Suffering is something we all experience, and right now especially, we're all in a collective experience. And suffering can be redemptive if we let it. Or it can take us to anger and bitterness. Depends on which way we respond. This next song is an old gospel song. It talks about surrender. And surrender's not always passive. Sometimes it's active. And surrender doesn't mean necessarily giving up. Maybe it means just to surrender to the circumstances as they are, to reality, so that you can actually then deal with the reality at hand. It may be a relationship problem. It may be all kinds of things. Right now, it may be coronavirus. Can't change it. We can rail against it, pretend it's not there, be angry, or we can surrender. And in surrendering, we find peace. I've had some tune floating around in my head for a long time. I think I've tried to play it one time. I'll just play it again. Hey, if I make mistakes. You know, I was a music theory major at UT. That's to say I wasn't a piano major, so that's a disclaimer. And I wasn't a voice major, so there's another disclaimer. So this next song for you theory buffs, you might find it a little intriguing, but I'm using it today as kind of a analogy, is that the right word, to coronavirus, in the sense that we're surprised. And this is going to be a familiar hymn, but it's going to have a bit of a surprise to it, and you'll need to count in order to figure that out. That was a little 5/4, and I think there was one measure that I missed. But we go on. A lot of the hymns came out of suffering. We don't long for suffering, but it comes to us. I think of that verse in Hebrews that says Jesus learned obedience through his suffering. I've never been able to figure that out theologically. How could Jesus learn anything, especially obedience? But there's something there. There's a redemptive quality in what's going on in his life, and that transfers to us. When we see everything within the scope of God's sovereignty, of God's presence, of God's grace. This next hymn is a very familiar hymn. You know the story about William Spafford and loss of his daughters. The interesting thing about that story, what you usually don't hear about, is after all of that transpired, he and his wife went to Israel and had a long, very rewarding and purposeful ministry. Maybe that wouldn't have happened otherwise. We can't figure out all the ways of God, but we can find in the midst of whatever circumstances we find ourselves, we can find peace. When peace, like a river, attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well, it is well with my soul. Though Satan should buffet, though trials should come, let this blessed assurance control that Christ has regarded my helpless estate and has shed his own blood for my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. My sin, oh the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin, not in part, but the whole, is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, praise the Lord, oh my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. Well, I don't think you could do a concert in a Baptist church without doing Amazing Grace. You know the words, I'm not going to sing it. This was pretty much the Baptist standard until I think a person named Judy Collins came along maybe 40, 50 years ago. I don't know. I'm getting so old now that, hey, what's a year or two? And she sang it and it became a pop song. And now it's pretty much you hear it anywhere. And of course, we know the story. I've heard many stories about Newton and what happened to him, but suffice it to say, his life was radically changed from being a slave driver to being a preacher. And he was just, I think, overwhelmed with grace the rest of his life. And we sing usually 4 or 5 of these verses, but he wrote scores of them that would fit for this song. Another song that we think of suffering, or any number of songs that Fanny Crosby wrote. Here's a person that could have been a bitter person, lost her sight at an early age. And when you think of some of these songs she wrote, and you think about the visions of rapture, burst on my sight. She lived in this, I guess, an arena that we who are sightful don't fully understand. And yet in that darkness, there was great light. This is the hymn of hers that is my most favorite. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of His Spirit, washed in His blood. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior am happy and blessed, watching and waiting, looking above, filled with His goodness, lost in His love. This is my story. This is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story. coronavirus all the day long. I have just one more song for you. And this one goes way back. I was thinking, I'm getting to be an old guy and I don't know new stuff. I know there's some good new stuff out there. But I'll leave that to others. The first time Linda and I experienced pregnancy, I was still in the Air Force. And that meant that we, on the good side, we were going to get a free baby. But on the negative side, it meant we were going to use Air Force doctors and facilities. And we had a doctor that we liked very well. But in a short while, he began to think maybe there were some issues. And Linda would go for a checkup one week and he would say, everything's fine. The next week she would go, he would say, I can't hear a heartbeat. This went back and forth. And it just put us in an emotional turmoil. One week it's good, next week it's bad. Finally, after about 3 or 4 months into the pregnancy, he finally determined that the baby had died. And when he took the baby, he told us that it had been dead for a long time, which calls into question all those heartbeats he said he was hearing. A couple things came out of that. First, you find that pregnancy is, as shared by women, the stories of it, there are so many heartbreaking stories that you don't hear about until something like this happens, and then women begin to come to Linda and share their stories and give her encouragement that she wasn't the only one that had a sad ending. The second thing is I remember going home and playing this song, singing it. I hope I can remember all the words today. This is an Andre Crouch song. And it applied in those days to our situation, and I hope it will apply today in our situation. That in the midst of change, uncertainty, there is the presence and activity of God that we need to look for and trust in. I've had many tears and sorrows. I've had questions for tomorrow. There have been times I didn't know right from wrong. But in every situation, God gave blessed consolation that my trials come to only make me strong. Through it all, through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God through it all. Through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. I've been to lots of places, and I've been through lots of places, and I felt so all alone. But in my lonely hours, yes, those lonely hours, Jesus let me know that I was His own. I thank God for the mountains, and I thank Him for the valleys, and I thank Him for the storms He's brought me through. For if I'd never had a problem, I would know that He could solve them. I'd never know what faith in God could do. Through it all, through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. I'm trying to learn to depend upon His word. Thank you. May God bless each of you. Speak to your hearts warmly through our time of struggle. This little